In 1947, when Harlem was a thriving hub of music, culture, and opportunity, Tony the Shark Marino made a decision that would seal his fate. He thought his power and connections in the New York Mafia would make him untouchable. He believed he could intimidate anyone, even a man as legendary as Bumpy Johnson. What Marino didn't know was that his act of disrespect would soon bring him face to face with a force that would leave him begging for mercy. This is the story of how Tony Marino crossed Bumpy Johnson, and how one foolish move led him to call Bumpy's mother Mama, a name he would be forced to say every day for the rest of his life. Tony, the Shark Marino, was a man who walked with the confidence of a king, but his throne was built on fear and deceit. A rising star in the Genovese crime family, Marino controlled the docks and smuggling routes that kept the streets of Harlem filled with liquor, drugs, and weapons. His arrogance was his shield. He believed that no one could stand against him, especially not a street legend like Bumpy Johnson. To Marino, Harlem was just another commodity to be exploited. He didn't care for its people, its culture, or its heroes. He only cared about one thing: power. But power can be a dangerous thing, especially when it's wielded by a man who doesn't understand the code of respect that runs through the veins of Harlem. Bumpy Johnson had always been the unspoken protector of Harlem, a man who believed in justice, true justice. He made it his mission to defend those who couldn't defend themselves. Harlem had its flaws, but Bumpy was the glue that held its streets together. He commanded loyalty and respect, not through fear, but through an unwavering moral compass and a fierce sense of duty. When Marino threatened Bumpy's mother, thinking he could get away with it, he crossed a line that would cost him dearly. He had no idea that by threatening Bumpy's family, he was signing his own death sentence. For Bumpy, there was no greater sin than disrespecting family. Marino's arrogance blinded him to the fact that he had just made a mortal enemy, and worse, one who never forgot an injustice. Marino thought he could push Bumpy into submission. He thought that by threatening the one person Bumpy held dear, he could make him back down. The threat came late one evening when Marino's men visited Bumpy's mother, an elderly woman known for her wisdom and grace in the community. They made it clear that Marino was ready to collect on a debt, one that Bumpy had refused to pay. They didn't just threaten her, they humiliated her in front of her neighbors, leaving a scar that could not be erased. The incident sent a ripple through the streets of Harlem. It wasn't just Bumpy's mother that had been targeted, it was the very soul of Harlem itself. Bumpy had always stood as a protector of the people, and when anyone crossed that line, they had to answer to him. The deeper meaning behind this conflict was clear. Marino didn't just threaten a mother, he threatened everything Bumpy fought to protect. Family, respect, honor, these were the cornerstones of Harlem, and to Bumpy, they were sacred. This wasn't just about Marino's debt or his ego, it was about Bumpy's code. A man who crossed that code would find himself facing justice at the hands of the one man who had earned the right to deliver it. The moral line had been crossed, and the clock was ticking toward the inevitable confrontation. It started when Marino's men cornered Bumpy's mother on the street outside her apartment. She was walking home from the store when they accosted her, making their intentions clear in a manner that was both disrespectful and cruel. One of them, a hulking figure with tattoos across his neck, grabbed her shopping bag and tossed it to the ground. "Tell your son we'll be taking what's ours," he sneered, "and if he doesn't pay up, things will get worse." Marino was used to getting what he wanted. He didn't care about Bumpy's reputation, didn't care about Harlem's code. To him, Bumpy was just another man trying to survive in a world ruled by money and fear. But he had made one critical mistake. He underestimated the depth of Bumpy's loyalty. Bumpy was no stranger to threats, but threatening his mother was crossing a line that no one should ever cross. When the news of the incident reached Bumpy, He didn't respond with immediate violence. He was too measured for that. Instead, he spent a quiet night sitting in his office, reflecting on the situation. In this life, you have two choices, Bumpy mused to his men. You either earn respect or you take it. Marino thinks he can take it. It's time to show him how wrong he is. Word reached Bumpy like it always did, from a trusted source, a network of loyal eyes and ears in the community. The message was clear. Marino had gone too far, but Bumpy didn't rush into a confrontation. No, he was too calculated for that. He needed to plan to ensure that when Marino faced justice, it would be swift, precise, and unforgettable. The news didn't shake Bumpy. It hardened him. I'm going to tell you something once, he said to his lieutenant, his voice steady and calm. A man who disrespects a mother will never survive in Harlem. We will deal with him, but we do it my way. His response was deliberate. He wasn't going to retaliate with brute force, but with a punishment that would make Marino suffer every day for the rest of his life. He wasn't just protecting his mother. He was teaching Marino a lesson that would echo through the streets of Harlem for years to come. As Marino continued his usual routine, he believed that the threat he had made to Bumpy's mother would be forgotten. He went about his business, moving between his hideouts, collecting debts, and making deals. He felt untouchable, like the power he held over Harlem's streets would shield him from any consequences. What he didn't know was that Bumpy was watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. The tension built as Marino's false sense of security grew. He believed that Bumpy was nothing more than a man trying to survive in a world of violence. What Marino didn't realize was that Bumpy was a man with a code, one that demanded not only respect for his actions, but also respect for his family. The trap was set in a way only Bumpy Johnson could orchestrate. Subtle, calculated, and precise. Marino had made the mistake of underestimating the depth of Harlem's loyalty to Bumpy, believing that his power and wealth would keep him safe. But what he didn't know was that every corner of Harlem had eyes on him. Every move he made, every deal he struck was being watched by Bumpy's people. Bumpy's men moved through the streets without leaving a trace, setting up the perfect conditions for the final confrontation. But Bumpy wasn't one to rush. He knew that the most potent form of justice was one that lingered, one that left the victim uncertain, wondering when the reckoning would come. On the night it was all going to unfold, Bumpy gathered his closest men in a back room, his presence as steady as a rock. He spoke little, letting his silence do the talking. He'll think he has us cornered, Bumpy said, his eyes scanning the faces of his men. But he doesn't know I've already trapped him. The plan was already in motion. Bumpy was going to make Marino understand the power of respect, and Marino was going to pay a price for every ounce of disrespect he had shown. Bumpy had planned this moment down to the last detail. He knew Marino would show up at his usual spot, the same nightclub where he had made his threat against Bumpy's mother. It was there that justice would be delivered, in front of an audience that would understand the significance of what was happening. Harlem would witness the fall of a man who believed he was untouchable. It was exactly midnight when Marino entered the nightclub, a smug smile across his face, believing he had nothing to fear. The music played softly in the background, and the usual crowd murmured in low conversation, oblivious to the storm that was about to hit. But when Marino entered, the atmosphere changed. The moment he stepped through the door, he froze. The air seemed thicker, the energy in the room changed. All eyes turned toward him, but there was no Bumpy at the bar, no Bumpy watching from the back. Marino felt an unease wash over him, but he quickly shook it off. He was a mobster, a man who had faced tougher situations than this. That's when he saw it. Bumpy Johnson, standing in the far corner of the room, watching him with an intensity that made Marino's stomach twist. The legend was real, and in that moment, Marino knew he had made a grave mistake. Bumpy didn't move, but his eyes were locked on Marino. The crowd parted and silence fell over the room. It was as if the streets themselves were holding their breath. "Do you know who I am?" Marino sneered, trying to regain his composure. His voice quivered slightly, but his arrogance pushed him forward. I don't answer to anyone. Bumpy took a step forward, his voice calm, measured. I know exactly who you are, Marino, he said, his tone cutting through the tension. But you'll learn today that you never disrespect my family. And you never disrespect Harlem. In that moment, Marino's face shifted from arrogance to realization. The trap had been set. Bumpy's calm demeanor masked a fury that would soon be unleashed. Marino opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The silence that followed was deafening. Without another word, Bumpy's hand shot out, grabbing Marino by the collar. The move was swift, precise. Marino found himself hoisted off the ground, his face inches from Bumpy's. The power and control Bumpy had over the situation were undeniable. From now on, Bumpy said quietly, you'll call her Mama every day for the rest of your life. The words landed like a hammer. Marino didn't fully understand the gravity of what was happening until Bumpy's men began to move in. They weren't there to break bones, they were there to ensure Marino would remember this moment. He wasn't just going to be punished, he was going to be humbled in the deepest way possible. The silence stretched out. The weight of what Bumpy had just said sank in. Marino was going to be forced to live with the consequences of his actions for the rest of his life, and there was no escaping it. Bumpy let him go, pushing him back into the crowd. The room watched in stunned silence. Marino was no longer the man in control. His bravado had been stripped away, and he was left humiliated and broken in front of those he had thought he ruled. The punishment wasn't about violence. It was about showing him that respect could never be bought. It had to be earned. The aftermath of Marino's fall was felt in every corner of Harlem. Word spread quickly about how Bumpy Johnson had made a man who thought himself untouchable kneel to the very community he had disrespected. Marino spent the rest of his days under the shadow of his mistake, calling Bumpy's mother Mama every single day, just as Bumpy had ordered. The community, however, saw this as a powerful reminder of the strength of respect. No longer would they allow anyone to come in and treat them as lesser. No longer would anyone cross Bumpy Johnson without facing the full weight of Harlem's justice. As for Marino, his reputation was shattered. The once feared mobster had become a joke, an example of what happens when arrogance overpowers respect. The legend of Bumpy Johnson grew even more cemented in the streets of Harlem. He wasn't just a man who ruled with power. He was a man who stood for the code, for justice, and for the people who depended on him to protect them. And so, Tony, the shark Marino, learned the hard way that no one, no matter how powerful, could escape the justice of Harlem's protector. Bumpy Johnson wasn't just a man who could deliver punishment. He was the embodiment of the code, the one who taught that respect is earned, not taken. If this story hit you, smash that subscribe button. We're telling the Bumpy Johnson story's history, forgot, stories of respect, family, and the price of crossing a legend. Drop a like if you think Bumpy was the smartest man in Harlem. And in the comments, what would you have done if you were Marino? Would you have dared to cross Bumpy? More legendary stories are coming soon, so don't miss it.